Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this wonderful panel about food. San Antonio is become quite an important food center in the United States. We just recently became designated a UNESCO Creative City of Gastronomy, and it's not only, it's wonderful, and it's not only because of our wonderful past, but because of our glorious present. So we're really excited about that. And today I have the very, very, very high honor of introducing two of my favorite food heroes in this town. Melissa Guerra is a food historian, an author, and teaches right now ancient foods at the CIA. And she has the most marvelous blog at Melissa Guerra, LK? No, yeah, it's melissaguerra.com. And I urge you to please go look at it because she writes so beautifully that I try to get her to contribute to Edible San Antonio as often as possible. And this is Johnny Hernandez, my other food hero. He's a celebrated chef in San Antonio, but he's so humble and so sweet, you would never know it to talk to him. Johnny not only gives a great deal back to the community, but he is considered by people other than me an international expert on Mexican cuisine. He has restaurants all over the world, yes, in the UK, Las Vegas, here in San Antonio, and more. And not only is he a successful restaurateur and a wonderful chef, but he also has a very, very, very unique take on San Antonio's food history. So without further ado, we'll start with Johnny. We're going to start with you first. You changed it? Okay. Okay, well, and you can see I have absolutely no control in this room. So Melissa's going to tell us a little bit about corn and flour and how they affect tortillas.
Okay, hello you all. My name is Melissa Guerra, and I am here today to talk to you about corn or flour tortillas. And it seems like a very innocent question whenever you go to a Tex-Mex or Mexican restaurant. They ask you, do you want corn or flour? And I always thought it was really so interesting because it's a really simple, very innocent question, but there's an absolute cultural cataclysm that's going on in that little basket. And nobody gets it. It's this whole war and, you know, just all of this drama, and it's all in this little kind of steamy little basket. And so I thought I would talk about that today because it's always fun to talk about the things that we ignore because that's usually where the best stories are. So here, and I took most of the photos, so these are some of my photos. And you know, are there any professional archaeologists here? Because if there's not, then I will automatically seem way more knowledgeable than I actually am. I don't have all the answers, but I certainly have all of the questions. And I get a lot of questions because I'm from the Rio Grande Valley. I live on a cattle ranch with my husband and my 3 sons who are now out in the world. They're not there anymore, but they're out in the world. I always have had people ask me about my culture because they don't expect somebody from South Texas to look like me or to act like me or talk like me. And so that actually led to a lot of questions as to who I am and who, you know, what do I represent? And I hate politics. So the way that I always looked at my self-identity was through food. And so I do get this question a lot, you know, what is more authentic, flour or corn? And then I had a reporter call me 2 weeks ago from New York City, and she wanted to know about flour tortillas, and I could tell that the theme that she wanted to pursue was that flour tortillas were actually a development of it was a Jewish food tradition. And I couldn't come up with the words fast enough to tell her no. So I had to come up, so you all will benefit from my knowledge. I talked to her at length, but I read the article and she put in that they were part of the Jewish food tradition. I'm like, oh my word. So I did a terrible job. So I'm going to talk to you about corn and flour, but we're first going to talk about flour. because they're further away from us. So let me give you a little bit of perspective, though. So, and some of these, if you have read about archaeology, maybe some of these dates that I'm going to tell you sound a little bit off or different, but I'm trying to go with the most recent information that I have found. So they are finding evidence, there's new evidence that humans had spread across Africa as of 300,000 years ago. Now, when I talk to my students, what I say is, you know, Big Bang happened 14 billion years ago, with a B, billion. And so if you look at the entirety of human civilization, and if you kind of plot that across a year, as per Carl Sagan, if you plot that across a year, then you get to the last few minutes of December 31st, and that is where humans started. If you think of the entirety of the universe when it started on January 31st, but humans, us people with arms and legs and eyes and whatever else we have, that starts somewhere around December 31st in like about the last half hour. Does that make sense? You can always find these videos on YouTube with Carl Sagan. I mean, very, very interesting to listen to him and to watch those 80s graphics. Yeah, they're terrible. But they're now estimating that the prior estimates had been 200,000 years ago. But now with Max Hübelin, they're finding that humans actually were moving across Africa 300,000 years ago. So that's a really big deal. But I think with the computers coming of age, and we're not relying on radiocarbon dating, but much deeper understanding of the way that bones and plants age, we're getting now to 300,000. So that's pretty exciting. And then people crossing Africa, going through Eurasia, and then coming down into the Americas, they're dating that now as around 20,000 years ago, crossing the Bering Strait. And then we're getting into our neck of the woods, Clovis, 11,000 years ago. But there's different little archaeological findings of first humans. And the reason that this is all important is because then we turn from hunter-gatherers into farmers. Being a farmer is super important. And that's when we start seeing the first signs of corn. Anyway, so let me get back to flour really quickly, though. Sorry about that. I got kind of off on the old stuff. But if we go to the first slide, let's see, this would be me. Got it. So this is the Fertile Crescent. So this is where wheat originated. So there's Mesopotamia, and you see that purple area that curves around, that is the Fertile Crescent. So Mesopotamia was the area that was between the two rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. So that is where wheat is from. And so what's interesting, though, is the evidence of club wheat was in Mesopotamia 3,000 years ago. So here's the kicker. Judaism started the start of Judaism was a covenant between God and Abraham, and they're estimating that as 1,800 years before the birth of Christ. So if Mesopotamia had wheat at 3,000 years before the birth of Christ, now what does that tell you? That means that flour tortillas predated Judaism. They predated... So anybody that comes in and says that the flour tortillas belonged to Germans when Germany was founded, like, in much later on, in the Teutonic, so it's much later. So the evidence for wheat predates any religion. So the only reason that we have religion, and I'm not saying Judeo-Christian, I'm saying, because I think Islam started in this same area as well. So the only reason that we have religion is that people stopped hunting and gathering and started farming, and they had time to think. They weren't surviving, they were thriving, and that is vital. So now y'all are experts. If somebody calls y'all from New York City and says, well, it's a Jewish food heritage, well, it's like, no, it predates Judaism. So that is where, so these are the varieties of ancient wheat. So there were 3 wild ancestors. These things, I can't even say them, just there they are. And then these are the cultivated varieties. And so remember that every ingredient that we know had a wild variety, and then it became cultivated. And for some people, they're like, there was a wild strawberry at one time. When I was in Peru, I saw a wild strawberry. It blew my mind. And there are wild predecessors of the plants that we eat today. So these are the early cultivated varieties. Let's see, I think I have some. So can you see emmer wheat? And do you see that club wheat? I don't know if you can see it. It's like kind of fat and bushy. Now that's the one that they found evidence of that in 3000 BC. So again, predate. So if we're talking about biblical wheat, we're probably talking about club wheat. So this is emmer, farro. This is like the primordial wheat. So we still see farro being eaten in Italy, and it is gluten-free. It doesn't have gluten in it. So some people are going back to this primordial wheat for those that have like gluten problems. And then spelt and einkorn. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't the emmer, it's einkorn. That's the non-hybridized. So you can see they look similar, but they've all been hybridized from those wild varieties. So once you have wheat, you have the wheat berries, it's made into a paste, it's rolled out into a bread. That's where you get naan, you get all the different pita breads and the great wheat-based pasty doughs. All of that come from these and then have been hybridized further. So this is, now we're going to switch to corn. This is one of my very favorite murals, and the boys and my husband and I were in Tlaxcala. Oh, fiddle, when was that? It was a long time ago because the boys were still listening to me at that point. So this is corn, and if you can see, let's see if I can get this. You see, it's a little dude, little guy. Look at all of them, and so corn. Now we're in Mesoamerica, and this is the grain that they have, is corn. And corn is sacred, but it grows from the earth. And, you know, there's all sorts of allegory and beauty and honoring of corn, but it actually predates flour. Let's see. The problem though with corn is that you can't find, remember how we were looking at einkorn and emmer wheat and spelt and all of that? You can't determine what those early hybrids were, because the only way that you can find that is from charred remains of corn. So there's a lot, you can't find uncooked or recently grown corn. It has to have been charred. So if somebody would have had to have roasted it, not eaten it, and let it fall to the ground, which would have not happened all that much. So it's difficult to find those early hybrids of corn. But I love this one. If you ever get to Tlaxcala and you can go to the Cacaxtla ruins, this is a much more vivid depiction of the murals, but I think it's spectacular. So this is, though, a map of where they found the oldest corn, the oldest cultivation of corn. And this was found in 1949 by Richard McNeish. And I think you can see where we are. We're right there, and they're right there. And this is Tehuacan Valley, the Cocaxtlan Caves. So to me, this looks like a little trade route. But what this shows is the density and the occurrence of archaeological finds of corn, of the earliest cultivations of corn. And this is in Tamaulipas, it's near Ocampo. And so the earliest findings of cultivation of corn are dated somewhere between 15,000 years ago. So let's go back to the beginning of the talk. When were we finding Mesopotamia and wheat? 3,000 years before Christ. So actually the finding of corn actually predates that. So it's much older. And let's see. When I started learning about food history, I always understood, anyway, let me finish with this one. super significant. This is the reason that we are now a World Heritage Site, is because the original, there would have been, with my students, we've been talking about how many hundreds of millions. There was 100 million people in the Americas before the Spanish got here. And then very quickly it became 6. So there was no lack of people that were here in the Americas. And this is where the primordial corn was found. So there's a ton of activity in the San Antonio, Monterrey area. And again, when I use those words, those are modern landmarks that at this time didn't exist, but knowing that civilizations and cities build on what's been vetted by the indigenous, we were a pretty hopping bunch for a very long time before the Spanish got here. Does that make sense? Is that clearly illustrated? I mean, things were happening here. And the fact that San Antonio had a river was not small. The river here, like these were all big deals in terms of getting population density. So let's go to the next one. And this, so it's looking at food history, it's really hard to get empirical data like this happened on this date. There's always something that you find that's older. These, if you look at these little stone tools, these are actually from Chile, from Monteverde, and this actually predates Clovis. Oh, sorry, back. You know, Clovis in New Mexico, they're showing that as being one of the oldest settlements in the Americas, but they're now finding with this new dating that they can do that there are older places. So this is from Tom Delahaye's dig in Chile, 14,000 years ago. But I want to show you, this is a natural domestication of corn. This is what they're supposing. So this is Tricentennial. Let me go forward one. Okay, these are the types of corn that when I became a food historian, what I would look at. And because I think it was Diana Kennedy that said that there were 6 different types of corn. You have popcorn, sweet corn, dent corn, flour corn, flint corn. Let me explain to these. Y'all have had popcorn, right? I've eaten lots of popcorn. We've all had sweet corn. Dent corn is like deer corn. It has that little dent in the end. You know, you looked at it, okay. Flour corn is what they use for Doritos. And flint corn is, it's the one that you have on your table at Thanksgiving, that decorative one that would taste terrible. And then Tricentennial is the original grass. But when I went to Peru, these designations, so, you know, Diana Kennedy is an expert on Mexican cuisine, but when I went to Peru, I realized that none of this applied because they had so many, the ancient, you know, the Incans and the Mayans, they had so many different microclimates that they had to deal with, and so they needed corn because they didn't have wheat or rice, they had to have corn. So the reason that corn is the god is that it's so adaptable in many, many different levels, altitudes, environments, and that is what has made it God in the eyes of the indigenous, is no matter where you went, it went with you and it could adapt. It was always adapting and evolving to your environment. So this is more or less what the original grass would have looked at, because every grain, rice, wheat, all of that, they're all grasses, and it's a seed head, and then it moves on, becomes a mutated hybrid naturally, and then maize is what we have today, which kind of falls into those 6 categories that I just talked, well, the 5, not the Tricentennial, because that's the original grass. But again, this middle part here, though, we can't really talk about, like we were talking about einkorn and emmer and spelt, we can't really talk about it because we have to get back to those charred remains, and those are very enigmatic. You can rarely find them. So we don't know a lot about this middle portion of how corn became corn, how it got here, because everybody ate it. So I found this morning. I thought I would throw this in there. Because eventually people start asking about corn and GMO. And because corn is so adaptable, it's a great candidate to be a GMO product. I mean, hello, we're running our cars on ethanol. Like, it's incredibly adaptable. You can eat it and you can run your car on it. You know, you can get in your car and go find something else to eat. You know, so you can use it for all sorts of things. So it's incredibly adaptable, but this slide is from Monsanto. So I'm not getting political, but they're bragging about it took 10,000 years to get from Tricentennial to corn and 15 years to get to an insect-resistant Bt common. Whoa! Whoa, mind blown. But it's incredibly adaptable, and now, you know, so the next time you do go to a restaurant, you know, which one do you want? Like, they're all different, and it's such a much bigger question than, you know, what's in the basket. Like, there's just a tremendous amount of history that I've always enjoyed. And like I said, I don't have all of the answers, but I do have more questions. And so anyway, I will continue to write about it. And I couldn't find any other question that's more fascinating than corn or flour.
While Johnny's getting ready, I just want to tell people a little bit more about him. That was great. That was great. Thank you. Tomorrow is the Paella Challenge, which is a very, very important event, not only because we have more than 30 chefs and 16 high school teams.
Yes, we have 36 chefs and 12 high schools.
And most of them are local chefs, but we always have one or two international thrown in and from coast to coast. So if you can attend tomorrow from noon to 4 at Mission Park, which is a beautiful setting right on the river and at the top of the missions, you'll get to feel the culture and taste the culture tomorrow. And all of the proceeds from that event go to a foundation called Kitchen Campus, which was founded by Johnny, which is to help people in San Antonio and anywhere, really.
Well, it's our Kitchen Campus is focused on nurturing the future culinary talent of our city and chefs and, you know, those that aspire to, you know, own a restaurant or work in the food industry.
So if you can go tomorrow, it's an event that you won't want to miss. It's wonderful. It happens every year, but tomorrow's going to be one of the better ones. So without further ado, Chef Johnny Hernandez.
Excuse me. Thank you. Good afternoon, I guess. Just really quick, just to maybe share with you my perspective. Today I'm going to talk to you about, you know, really a little bit of how I've seen our food evolution, you know, from my perspective as a chef. And my perspective began quite young, rolling out flour tortillas at my dad's restaurant and pursuing my career as a chef at the CIA, and then traveling throughout the country, really focused on international food, falling in love on missionary trips in Mexico with, you know, just the rich heritage of Mexico, and then dedicating really the rest of my life, which about maybe 15 years ago, you know, a little light bulb went off in my head, and I said, as I was traveling through Mexico and cooking down there with on some big missionary projects with my mom, I was like, why aren't we doing this in San Antonio? You know, I certainly grew up in the kitchen, understanding Tex-Mex food and these traditions, but when I got to travel through central Mexico and the Yucatan, I'm like, this is wonderful food. Why isn't it in our city? And because I can see all the connections to what I grew up with. And so my perspective on what I'm going to talk to today are those life experiences. So we now have, like Angela said, you know, probably about 15 restaurants throughout Texas, and then we have some special projects that I'm working on in the UK and in Spain. So it certainly, you know, broadens, you know, I love how it broadens my knowledge of food, but also how it's finding its way internationally. And to me, it certainly speaks to what our World Heritage designation now under UNESCO as a city of gastronomy. You know, we were selected because of our heritage, because of how dedicated and how hard we work as a city to preserve these traditions. And also the third part is what we're doing to continue to preserve and evolve and educate. So that is, like Angela said, a recent designation that we're very proud of. The final, and I'll start here really quick on a video that I'd like you to see, but one of the critical steps of the designation was different commitments that the city of San Antonio would make to preservation, to cultural food history. And we are working on a very special project in La Witte where we're redeveloping Maverick Plaza, and we're opening up, myself and Chef Elizabeth Johnson and Steve McHugh, we're working on 3 restaurants that will open there probably in about, still a couple years out, but these restaurants will showcase our food heritage and a lot of what Melissa was saying about some of the German influences, but also obviously native Spanish and of course Mexican food, which is what I'm committed to doing for the rest of my life. My restaurant will be focused on the Yucatan, and I know one of my recent, it's something that I'm always interested in learning. And when Maya came to the Witte, I realized how little I know about the Yucatan and how little I know about the Mayan influence on our food. And so that's a connection that I want to make, that I want to bring to life there at La Witte as my kind of special project, hopefully the last concept that I develop. Because now I want to kind of like retrace my steps and begin to spend more time in the kitchen. So anyway, so let me, I want to show you this video that the Brand USA, which is the national organization that promotes the United States to the world, selected 6 cities in America to promote internationally. And San Antonio was one of the cities selected, and and they selected chefs to be part of to be the spokesperson on this global campaign. So this video played in 160 countries. But let me show it to you. If I can go forward, and then to play, do I hit? No, I'm going there. That is the mural at La Gloria. Okay, so let's see if, no. How do I get the video going? Oh, maybe a little more volume, yeah.
Is going through a food renaissance right now. You certainly see it in the flavors and the spices and the Mexican food, the Tex-Mex flavors. All of those things make San Antonio special. La Gloria is located in San Antonio, Texas, and our inspiration is certainly the street foods of Mexico. We work very hard maintaining authenticity. My earliest memories of food definitely are growing up in my dad's kitchen. I was probably about 4 years old. I would have my bed made under my dad's chopping block. That was my morning, waking up to those sounds and those aromas. Roasted chilies, toasted kind of open flame. These flavors, these ingredients help shape the food of our restaurants. It's a big part of San Antonio. People come to experience a piece of Mexico.
Okay, so that, like I said, that was a video that aired internationally, and again, that speaks to our wonderful food heritage that stood out as a city in America. There are certainly just a handful of cities in America and in the U.S. that have certainly a heritage and a sense of place when you visit, and that's what we, I believe that Mexican food in the U.S., you think of San Antonio for that. This, in our restaurants, and again, as a chef and as a restaurateur, all my restaurants certainly are shaped by ingredients and tradition. And that was, La Gloria was, street food that to me represented a great variety of all the things that I love and I experienced. You saw some dried chiles in the mercado there. Obviously, those are things very synonymous with our food and the food I grew up with. Fruterías, which was a concept that I wanted to bring to life in Southtown. So we have our licuados and we have our fruit cups, and all those things that you see on the south side, the west side, and they're making their way, north and along our river. So these are things that I focus on, that that we share. And the another significant part of our concepts are the tradition. These are these are some ladies. We had a conference here at the CIA that brought in doñas from Oaxaca and from different parts of Mexico who showed us how to make mole on metates. This is Don Nacho, who makes our molcajetes for our restaurant, and he's sitting in a molcajete that he took a couple years to make. And I went, they have he has a mina, a mine. We rented a crane to pull out a piece of basalto, probably about 6 tons, and ended up with this molcajete that is about maybe 5 feet across and weighs about 700 pounds. So it was a special project that Don Nacho helped me with. I mean, we used dynamite and everything to get it out of the quarry. So, again, another significant part of our restaurants are shaped by all the crafts, the artisans that we work with throughout Mexico. Our 2 newest restaurants, Burgerteca and Villarrica, are great examples of that. If you visit them, you'll see all the artisan crafts that we've incorporated into the decor. And this was a tradition, obviously, that I grew up as a child. Barbacoa was something that I used to make with my dad. We would serve it on the weekends at his restaurant, and this was I remember every Friday night we would go put the beef heads to cook, and next to my dad's restaurant was a molino, and you could smell the barbacoa and the nixtamal, the corn that's cooking in the lime, for corn tortillas. We lived in a small West Side neighborhood, but this was I want to show you a quick video that I did that we shot with Andrew Zimmern, and if you can help me start this one.
Just 150 miles from the Mexican border, Hispanic culture and tradition run deep in San Antonio. Nearly 60% of the city's population traces its roots back to Mexico. Bringing authentic Mexican cuisine to the masses has been the life's work of one native son, Chef Johnny Hernandez.
People always ask me, what is the difference between authentic Mexican food and Tex-Mex? And I think Tex-Mex food, wonderful and signature of San Antonio, but interior Mexico is by originality in its flavors and layers and textures. It's just a wonderful thing. So it's in contrast so different.
When Johnny's not exposing Texans to genuine Mexican food in his restaurants, he's entertaining them at his home and event space, Casa Hernandez. It's a gallery of Mexican art and sculpture and a testing ground for tastes and traditions that Johnny can't replicate in his restaurants.
The traditional barbacoa of the north is made with the beef head, but most of them are cooked in the ground. So I just kind of replicated that here.
Goat, lamb, beef. There are as many different types of Mexican barbacoa as there are people making them. The whole head style, perfected along the Texas-Mexican border, is seasoned with hoja santa, oregano, parsley, and thyme, wrapped in fresh banana leaves.
So we're going to grab the head right into fold these over.
Further seasoned in a cocoon of roasted maguey leaves. Our head follows a box of mesquite coals into a pit 6 feet deep.
So we're letting her down.
I am, honest to God, jealous of your deep hole. I have a 3-foot hole at home. I need a deeper hole. By the way, notice that the heads are not wrapped with aluminum foil.
Yeah.
I mean, the air circulation, the further scorching of the leaves, and it all aromatizes that fantastic dish.
Covered with a clay comal, it takes 6 hours for the head to fully cook and absorb its rich seasonings. This head went into the ground long before sunrise.
Wow.
Stunningly cooked, extremely tender, the cheeks, eyeballs, and tongue relent at the slightest touch. Removing the brain is done with style.
Trying to get in there. There it is.
That may have been one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Chef just went back 30,000 years to caveman days and used a half jawbone to prise the brain cavity open. Are you kidding me?
I used to love doing that when I was a kid.
Holy crap!
Those brains join our tongue, cheek, and eyeballs, layered on fresh corn tortillas, topped with cilantro, onions, avocado, and fresh pico de gallo.
Help yourself.
All right. So I thought showing that to you would help, I guess, maybe showcase something obviously very traditional growing up, something that we try to preserve obviously in our restaurants. This is I put this slide in here because I know Melissa was talking about tortillas, and there's always a debate, what's the difference between Tex-Mex, authentic Mexican food, tacos, burritos, but for so many years I had never had a burrito in Mexico, or a chimichanga for that matter, which is a fried burrito. So I was like, one of my quests was to find one, and this is in northern Mexico, and they have a bunch of guisos, and they're rolling out flour tortillas. And so I put that in there, see if it's a topic that we want to discuss later on. Because we're a city of tacos, but in Vegas, where we have La Gloria, they call everything burritos. In Houston, we have a restaurant in Houston, and we had to change the name to Burritos, and because they don't know what a taco is, which was really strange to me. So the other cooking style that we showcased is an asadero, cabrito, carne asada, and I wanted to show this again. This is one of the traditions that we can start this video. I wanted to show you this special project that we took on that we're opening on the south side. This is El Machito, which we had at the quarry for a couple years, and we're moving it to Brooks, and we'll do that later on this year. But this is another quick short video that I wanted to show you, and then I'll wrap up here. The grill that we've made for El Machito is a combination of grilling that I've seen through northern Mexico and then through central Mexico. We've adapted the grill to work within a restaurant environment, a fast-paced environment, and typically what you see if you go to a grill or an asadero in Mexico, they're going to have a specialty, whether it's cabrito, borrego, pollo asado. They have their specialties. Their equipment is made just for that cut of meat. But we've done here at El Machito, I've created a grill that gives us a couple different ways to control heat, to control the distance of the protein as it comes in contact with heat and as comes to and from the actual wood itself. It is a grill that was made in Guadalajara for things as simple as seafood and fish that can cook in about 10 minutes. And on this same grill, we cook things slowly that will take up to 3 and maybe even 4 hours. So it's taken a lot of thought, and it's been engineered to be able to cook that broad range. So that's cooking with fire. Serious stuff. So that pescado zarandeado, I was in the streets of Nayarit, and there was a good friend of mine, and his grandfather prepared it for me. And the original grill, the prensa, that metal cage, he made it out of mangles, which is a wood that grows along the rivers on the edge of the water. And he tied it around the fish and put it into the coals. And that's, the original apparatus for grilling fish. And so it was like these experiences are kind of ingrained in my head, and when I opened up Machito, I said, I have to do pescado zarandeado. And that was the interview with a group out of New York. And I'll just wrap up by sharing with you one of our special projects that that we've been working on now for about 4 years. Since we opened La Gloria, we've been making our tortillas and our chips and tostadas. And the most common question for me that I was asked was, is it non-GMO? Is it non-GMO? And I'm like, man, it's tough enough to make it fresh every day. So now I got to go find non-GMO corn, and it took me a while, and it's actually very difficult to source because it's expensive. It's expensive. So I decided to go about it a different way, and I met a partner, a grower, the Colapel family out of Castroville. So I committed to buying. We kind of had an estimate. How much corn do I need? We found a hybrid variety that was non-GMO that was going to do well in South Texas. And first year we planted about 150 acres, And this year we planted about 230 acres of corn, or the Colapel family planted the corn for me. And this is Mr. Colapel, who is, he actually grew up down the street from where I grew up, close to Van Wally Farms. And he's, you know, when I first met him, you know, he had his son and his grandkids, and of course I asked him, well, how long you been farming? He goes, well, I used to use a mule. So you put things in perspective right away. But that was our very first crop, and it's beautiful. It was amazing. So in Texas, there's one crop. There could be a bumper crop if the stars align. And but one crop, you know, he dries the corn on the plant itself. It gets harvested. We silo it, and then he ships it he delivers it to my molino every, a few days a week. So now we cook about 800 pounds of corn every day in our molino, and we make all our chips, our tortillas, our gorditas, everything that you eat at La Gloria or Fruteria, any of our restaurants, is produced in our molino. And it is hard work, but it's so worth it. You know, the aroma of fresh stone ground corn is irreplaceable. Until you taste the two or smell the two side by side, you'll never know the difference. But I promise you, you'll never eat another corn packaged tortilla if you can, once you have the real deal. And this is just some images of our molino. There are tortillas, and that was me up there on the combine when we were harvesting our very first crop. So just something quite special, and I wanted to kind of wrap up with showing you, again, another thing that we're working hard to preserve. So thank you. Gracias.
So now, if you're in one of Johnny's restaurants, the corn or flour issue just goes away, because it's going to be corn. I'd like to open up for questions at this time. Yes, ma'am. Blanca.
Thank you for your conference. It was wonderful. And I have two comments that are not questions, just that possibilities of new research that maybe we can do together. In Mexico, we have more than 64 different kinds of corns. And these corns are used in different kinds of foods, not only in tortillas. For example, we have the cacahuacintle that is used in pozole, or the mixteco that is used in the guisos of the mixteca, and so on and so on. So, and we could also make a research in the way the ancient Mexicans used the corn. So I think you have a tema de investigación very interesting. And for you, the influence is not only coming from Mexico to the United States. Now we have adopted a lot of foods that comes from the Tex-Mex cuisine. For example, we do have burritos in Mexico, and we do eat chili dogs in Mexico. So, so I think this is a very interesting research that we can do. Un intercambio que va en las dos direcciones. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, right here.
Going through the Southeast, there's a huge corn tradition. There are a number of products that you don't see in Mexico. You see a blue corn, but it's not like New Mexico blue corn. It's burnt pea hulls mixed with finely ground cornmeal. There are also products like pasole. There's products that are soured corn. That's a fundamental dish throughout the Southeast. And these are all native foods. And have you all done anything with those? There's not a lot of research. Unless you're living with one of the tribes that produces the material. And it's a lot about how the corn's processed, what the result is, and how they crack it.
I want to find more information on samp and the way that the African American population had used samp. And then you have stuff that the Navajos, like the Peaky bread, which is, it's like like a blue corn that's swiped over a comal, and they make this sort of a phyllo dough with it. So, but it goes back to the adaptability of corn. It's so malleable. You know, in my kitchen store, I made an order, and we actually got these baby dishes that were microwavable, and they were made out of cornstarch, and they were hard as melamine. I mean, they're really hard. So, I mean, the amount of products that you can extract from corn and maize and zea maize, you know, it's infinite. It's absolutely infinite, and so that's why I'm saying I have more questions than I do answers, because you can't get to the end of corn.
I know one of the things that I'm working on is with Tucson, one of our sister cities of gastronomy. We're making some trips to connect with them, because of their use of corn is obviously is very different. Whereas some of your suggestions, I think we can hopefully discover or apply with some of these collaborations with Tucson.
Let me say one more thing. The cool thing about being in San Antonio is that we get to see these micro manipulations of a grain that people who have a wheat heritage would be expressing. Like, our understanding of wheat in my vernacular is bread, chili dog buns, you know, it's bread. But if you go to Syria and you go to Turkey and Morocco, how they use wheat is very different regionally. But we being San Antonians, we have a much more intimate relationship with corn because it's ours. Does that make sense? You know, so anyway.
My question is a little more simplistic. I grew up in San Antonio. I had never had a flour tortilla until I was probably in my 20s. None of the restaurants served you a flour tortilla. They served you a corn tortilla. What made that change?
Wow. You know, I mean, I think Mexico and San Antonio, I don't know. I think our traditions tend to live and maybe not exceed certain boundaries geographically. You know, because I mean, I grew up, you know, on the west side, and you know, there was flour tortillas, I think, readily accessible, and we had a molino and a panaderia. But I mean, it's hard to imagine, you know, today, the city today, knowing not having access to a flour tortilla.
But it's very distinct. I mean, I agree with Johnny, like, but it's the culture between corn and flour is just very distinct, and they weren't always thrown together in the same basket the way they are now. You know, it was like, well, you had flour tortillas for breakfast, maybe, but it didn't go into the main meal.
And I think part of it has to do with commercialization, right? Because, you know, flour tortillas, you know, apaloteado, right? With a broomstick, we used to make them, and you know, the corn tortilla machine was invented way before the flour tortilla machine. So you know, it stuck to our neighborhoods, the Mexican Hispanic neighborhoods, and corn was just commercialized a lot quicker. You know, so I mean, that to me would probably be the only explanation.
It may have been cheaper. You know, I mean, really, economy always drives cuisine first.
They freeze well,
Yeah,
and
they do.
flour
Okay.
do not.
Yeah.
We have another question over here.
Your molino, can people go in there and buy these corn tortillas, or are they all for your restaurants?
No, but that's
They're just for our restaurants right now. There is hope. It took me a couple years just to get it down. But no, we would love to have a retail storefront where we can sell them to our customers who want to buy them, especially because it's an amazing, extremely different. But yes, but it is challenging, but it's beautiful. I mean, the difference is unbelievable.
Do you think pigweed will ever come back as a food item? Pigweed?
over there.
Oh, pigweed? Are you
Yeah,
talking about
pigweed.
Purslane?
No, pigweed.
Um,
I don't know the generic name, but pigweed.
Pigweed?
Because originally the Incas were always eating it, and then when Cortez came in and destroyed them, he destroyed all the pigweed crops.
Let's talk. I'm not familiar.
Well, Matt Turner wrote a book about the remarkable plants of Texas, and one of his plants is pigweed.
I'm writing that down.
How do you spell that? P-I-G?
Pigweed, P-I-G-W-E-E-D. That's what all the farmers are trying to get rid of, you know, on their farms. But they make, in Mexico, they make the Mexican candy Alegria out of pigweed.
Oh, the alegrías. Oh, then that would be that's amaranto. Yeah, that's
So it's a form of amaranth.
Podium ambrosiodis. Yeah, well, I know what you're talking about. I think, yeah, it's actually a relative of quinoa, actually, and so it's in that same family, but it's probably a variety off of that. But I think it is a derivative of the. ¿Cómo se dice? Las alegrías es, pero es amaranto. It's amaranth, but it's a derivative. Yeah, no, that's kind of a big thing for, especially for the gluten-free folks. But it's like what do you call it? Epazote. No, it's like epazote. It's from the same family, and it reseeds itself. So even though Cortés was trying to knock it out, it was going to come back someplace else.
I have another question.
Yeah,
over
I know
here.
what you're talking about, but I hadn't heard that indigenous word before. That's very interesting. So I'm going to write that down, but I'll circle back with you in a little bit. I'm writing it down.
I have another question over here.
Yes, I'm glad to see that you have a coast city, Tucson, Arizona, where I grew up, as you did, with your father, my family. I would learn how to cook underneath the women that worked in our house that had come from the Sonoran. And that type of food is a little different than the Tex-Mex. It has a totally different flavor. So we make a lot of chicken molays. And we took goats and we would cook the heads of the goats and take all the sinuses and make them into tamales. And then they also have green corn tamales, which is another, I don't know what type of corn they
It's
use.
not a sweet corn because that's too juicy. So
Well,
it'd have
yeah.
to be some. They always call it field corn, but
Well,
it's one of those dent, flint, or pops.
What I'm hoping is that maybe you might go there and help them to learn how now, because they've gotten too, soft. And so they didn't used to be when I was growing up, but now they're soft, and they cook them all day, and they're just wonderful. Anyway, hope enjoy it down there.
No, you know, I mean, I
Lots
think
of
that
different foods.
as I've traveled through Mexico and, you know, everything that I try to go down there and learn, I try to develop, obviously, a way to introduce tradition and these products in our restaurants. And so it's kind of a careful balance, right? What can you introduce that it's just not that I only want, but that my customers want. But I know that Sonora is a part of Mexico that I've made just very few trips to Sonora, but I know that their cuisine, I see it, the influences when I work out in Vegas and other parts of the country. You see the distinct difference, the ingredients. So, and I've not seen the green corn of Sonora, but other than in books.
Well, it's been lovely, but it's time to end this wonderful conference. Thank you all
So
very, very
please-
much for coming.
Please join us.